The 2019 World Press Freedom Day in Denver, and this is Africa Agenda. We are going to go to our audience. We have a small group of people here with me at the Postman Center. I'm going to just have a little bit of a discussion. We're going to have some kind of an interaction here at the Postman Center. We have, I believe, I know everybody's name, I believe. I'm going to start Dr. Malcolm Newton, Peter Leaks, Dr. Luca Poanga, Andy McKean, Karen McKean, and Dr. Paul, and then of course Ryan Che. So we are going to, I just want to have a small discussion. We're talking about all the things that are going on in the news. What I'm going to do is just have each of you have a little take on this. Your opinion, what you think is going on, what needs to happen, what we as a community need to do to change perceptions about the continent, how do we get better news reported about the continent, what are the things that we need to do as a community to build this community, to get the news out and make sure that information will accurately inform about things that are going on. So maybe I'll start again with Dr. Poanga, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, and I'll go around and we'll just have that discussion to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think I'll be very brief on this one. Some of the things that need to be done is, first of all, there has to be ownership by the African citizens. They have to own some media outlets, because then they can control dished out, so to speak, and make sure that that's fair information. And then two, we have to have a lot of training, so that students are going through the programs. I don't know how good some of these programs are, but as students are going through the programs, they are learning all these things. Most of all, they are learning ethics, so that as they go out there, even if they are faced with situations where they could accept a bribe, they're not going to do that, because they understand why they are there is to provide quality news. And then three is to make sure that when we are talking to people, we have to correct some of these news outlets, some of these news that is going out there. We have to have a way of counteracting it, like the way you wrote something about, hey, this was wrong. That came to some other people. Obviously others may not have believed you, but by the fact that they saw that, then they must have started thinking about it. And that is how we are going to advance each other, so to speak.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that or say something? And in 2 minutes, please.
2 minutes,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I was thinking of the African Union, because I watched the video on the African Union, and I don't know what role that would have, but it's kind of, they're trying to create an African Union like the European Union, which we know is struggling, or like the United States, where all the states are together. So when I watched the video with all the leaders in Addis Ababa, which Ethiopia had some problems, but they all got together. What about that organization of all these leaders from Africa? You're talking, isn't that what they're there for? To lead Africa? Why, something coming out of that, and maybe supporting what you were saying, the money needed to have independent people speaking and making a statement to all of Africa that we as African Union, all of us here, we all think this is a top priority. It's important in Africa for freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I think they have a role to play. I don't know if they've said anything on that, but I think they ought to. And I don't know what contacts we could have with those people in Addis. I know there's an ambassador I've been trying to get in touch with in Washington, D.C. that was sent from the African Union to the United States. And I think someone should contact her. I can't think of her name now. You might know her, but
yeah. That's a good suggestion. Peter, Dr. Malcolm Newton, did you guys have anything to add to that? What are some of the challenges when you read the news? Do you have the issues with it? What do you think?
So I would say that issue-wise, you have lots of issues with freedom of the press. As far as whether people have the right to talk about a government or something that's going on. You fear a lot. It changes based on who's in control, who's in government, who's sitting in the presidential seat. So I would like to see that people are able to get both perspectives, but sometimes it's not always clear, and people are penalized because they want to speak the truth about what's going on, and people do have a right to know. At the same time, though, it can't always be negative or one-sided, so that's always a challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Newton.
Well, I'm here to learn, but I'll just add my 2 cents in 2 minutes. I like what Dr. Lucas said when he was being interviewed. The neutrality. Neutrality is so important, and I think that we have to be trained to be neutral and not to take sides. And I think the key to that is understanding that you are no longer being colonized. We still have to pull away from being colonized. A lot of the old news reporters are still colonized in their thinking, in their mind. And I think what he said is ownership, neutrality, and training. That needs to happen on the global scale within the continent of Africa.
Thank you. Ryan? Ryan is going to be making a trip to Uganda in the next several weeks. Did you?
So yeah, that'll be my first trip to Africa here in 2 weeks to Uganda, and I'm looking forward to it. Kind of been getting involved with Africa Agenda, and I think it's time for me to see it for myself and make my own opinions. But in terms of what's going on here tonight, I think there's a lot of great ideas that have been thrown around. Luca had some nice ideas. I liked hearing about a little bit about the political side from Mr. Ben there. But the thing that's come to my mind is technology and the use of technology, especially amongst the younger new generations that are coming up. And there's obviously tremendous opportunity there: Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, various other platforms. But the question becomes is what happens when the internet is cut off? And I read an article recently where there's several African countries just this past year that have in some form or way cut access to internet. Most recently, I read that the country of Chad has gone 1 full year, 365 days of having no access to internet, imposed by the government to repress voice, opinion. And so, I think there's a lot of challenges going on with that. And when those do happen, when, incidents like that do happen, how are people going to get around that? And how are people going to continue to report the news accurately, fairly, like we've talked about tonight? So that's kind of what I've been thinking about.
Let me throw another question out there. Very often we can have these ideas and have this discussion, but I think one of the things that I put, I'm going to come to Dr. Paul in just a moment. We can have a discussion, and one of the things that I notice is that sometimes we are personally constrained by fear. I've seen this a lot of times, and I think I'd like to start, we're starting to, as an organization, I think we're starting to get a little bit more aggressive in the way we put out information to have people think about the information that they get. But, we may have very great ideas about what we think we need to do, but we're constrained by fear because we're afraid that, there are consequences to our actions, right? Dr. Powanga recommended this. Dr. Bongan recommended this, and I think it's a great idea. I want to take some steps to do, but that fear, what are people going to think of me when I do X, Y, Z? I think that's a problem that we sometimes. I'm saying that as a person, we have to deal with that. How do we address the question of fear of getting in a society where there are issues? We all understand there are issues of racial justice, of issues of equality in our society. Misinformation, people want to counter that. How do I address the question? How do I pass that barrier of I'm afraid. Well, what are people going to think about me? That's a big issue. Anybody want to answer? Is there a solution to that? Is there a question to that? I think that's a big question. When we take action, when we get out there, you're putting yourself out there. We're talking about all these journalists in different African countries that see issues, and they want to put out the news, but man, they're going to chop my head off if I put this thing out.
That's legitimate fear. I'm thinking of Cameroon. They have this oil pipeline going from Chad through Cameroon that was built a number of years ago to Kribi. millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue is being generated to Cameroon. Where's it going? Where's it helping the people? I know that's happening. I had a report from somebody that was interviewing people along the pipeline when it was being built. You never hear anything about that. The Exxon Mobils and all the big rich oil companies that built that pipeline, I understand there's $600 million a year in revenue going to Cameroon. The government gets it. Where are the people? They get nothing. And I can speak that. I don't know if you as a Cameroonian or Bonga, if he's in Cameroon, could say that. Probably not. I know I couldn't. I wasn't allowed as a Peace Corps volunteer to speak politics publicly. So we were told in our training, do not talk any politics. When you're a guest in this country, you can observe, but don't say anything. But after I observed, now I'm here, I can speak. Because I'm in America.
Did you have some comments on that?
So in Liberia recently, we had a $16 billion scandal of money being missing. The guy that broke the story had a lot of challenges. I mean, he kind of almost had to take exile, come here, and go back. But I think when you have governments like this that are repressive, they're also trying to get aid. So reaching out and letting people know in the diaspora in different countries that are going to put, like the IMF and ECOWAS and some of these other places, can put pressure on the governments so that they don't have that such a tight control or stronghold. Because they're saying, yeah, we want to be freedom of the press, but at the same time they're not behaving in that manner. So.
Did you want to add to that? Okay. So anyone wants to add to that? And then before we'll move on to one last thing, and then we'll try to wrap this up.
Just follow up on, well, first of all, I think Luke is going to have to go here pretty soon. He's got an 8 o'clock, but anyway, I just want to follow up your point about the pipeline. I read recently, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a lawyer from Liberia, and he was representing local communities there was a foreign company that was coming in to pretty much clear out 515,000 acres worth of forests in order to produce palm oil. And the communities felt like they were getting ripped off, they weren't getting any say. And this one lawyer, this one guy, kind of took up the case, took up the argument. I think it took several years. In fact, it got to the point of it was threatening to him. The government, other people were threatening towards him, and he actually had to leave Liberia and continue the fight from here in the United States. And I just heard the other day that he was successful. And I believe you're right. He did win an award for standing up to big industry and in a forest in Liberia. So that's just an example of that. It is possible. There is hope. There is people out there on the continent, outside of the continent, that are taking on these issues.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Dr. Kawanga is going to have to take leave very shortly. Did you want to make some final thoughts, final comments before?
Well, my comments are that these are very good forums, and what I would like to see is a follow-up to this. There are a lot of organizations, we sit and we talk about these issues, but we don't have the next steps. So what I would like to see is what are the next steps, so that next time we meet, we can report on those next steps, what we did, what happened, where we are, and who else do we need to bring in the fold so that we can move forward.
Thank you.
I don't know the answer to this. Is there a training facility or facilities in Africa, or any schools in Africa, anywhere, where young African potential journalists can go and get trained? You talked about training. I've heard a couple of people talk about. You talked about a Bonga. I think it's not just getting trained. Then you got to be safe, like you said. Fear. I don't know if I'd have the guts, to be honest with you, if I was there. I know a friend of mine spoke out against Cameroon government. He'd been there 5 years. He was given 24 hours notice, an American, to get out of there. He was supposed to train us back in '69 in Cameroon. He was told not to speak out. He did, and that was it. If he was a Cameroonian, they probably would have killed him or put him in jail without due process. They just said, "You're gone." and we were supposed to train in Cameroon. We ended up training elsewhere because he spoke out. So they don't play. I mean, you think as an American, we're used to being free to speak like we're doing here. It's not that way in a lot of Africa, I don't think. I wish it was.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Dr. Pawanga, for coming. Thank you so much. And while Dr. Pawanga is taking a leave, we are going to wrap this up. Just a reminder for those of us, or those of you who are watching this video on Facebook, on the Africa Agenda website. This is the concluding moments of our Africa News Night on the 2019 World Press Freedom Day celebration in Denver, Colorado. And I want to extend thanks to all of our guests. Dr. Ben Bongang from Savannah State University in Georgia will join us via Skype. Dr. Luca Pawanga from Regis University, and our little audience here at the Posner Center for International Development. We want to say thank you for joining us, and then next year we will see you again. But before I say final goodbye for the night, I'm going to be on KGN Radio, I believe. I'll put that information on our website. Continue this discussion. I had another discussion on this subject. We're going to continue this discussion on KGNU Radio. We'll post that on our website, on our Facebook page, and on Twitter, so check it out. So George Bamu with the Africa Agenda crew. Thanks to Ryan Chase, volunteer with Africa Agenda. He's heading to Uganda in 2 weeks. Isaac Alawobo behind the cameras. Andy McKean, Karen McKean, Naquita Ricks, Dr. Malcolm Newton, and Dr. Paul Doctor taking some photos. Thank you all, and goodbye from Africa Agenda.